Hello, my name is Dr. Lisa Marnell. I am the founder of Kids Master Skills and I am an occupational therapist. Welcome to the third video presentation for the Mindful Mondays series, in which I am sharing with you ideas to support autistic students in schools using neuro-affirming and strengths-based practices. If you would like to receive this recording, please sign up at my website, kidsmasterskills.com, and sign up to Mindful Mondays, and then I'll send you the recording, the slides, and the references that I will be using tonight. This is a Facebook Live, but it is a pre-recorded presentation that I am streaming. And when it is streamed to Facebook, I will be in the comments, so I'll be there to answer any questions that you may have. Also, this presentation will be posted on my YouTube channel at Kids Master Skills. So tonight we will be talking about IEP goals that do not help autistic students and what we can do instead. Without further ado, let's get started. I will minimize my screen and I will walk you through this presentation. IEP goals that don't help autistic students and what to do instead. My name is Dr. Lisa Marnell. I can be reached through my website at kidsmasterskills.com or by email at kidsmasterskills@gmail.com. I would like to jump into this presentation now, and I want to state that traditional goals are often damaging to autistic students. Traditional IEP goals are not neutral much of the time. In fact, they can actively harm autistic students' mental health. As a school-based occupational therapist, I have attended many IEP meetings. I haven't exactly kept track, but it's well into the hundreds and it may be more. In many IEP meetings, there has been this point where I feel very uncomfortable because I know that some of the IEP goals that are being shared are not in the best interests of autistic students. The goal may put them in a state of perpetual discomfort. They may feel pressures through the actions of the adults in their school settings. Often I knew that a given goal would add stress to the students' lives, or that they might promote masking or camouflaging of autistic traits, which we know through research now can lead to detrimental mental health effects. In this presentation, we will consider IEP goals that are common in schools, but that research shows are destroying the well-being and identity of our autistic students. So I am going to walk you through 4 types of traditional IEP goals that are damaging to autistic students and what we can do instead. The first type is compliance goals. So examples of compliance goals is that the student will follow directions without protest in 4 out of 5 opportunities. Another would be the student will sit quietly on the rug for 10 minutes. So this, I put a red flag because these are goals you may see in an IEP meeting. You may see it as a parent on your child's IEP. And as a teacher, you may see that and identify that in yourself. And you may want to switch things around. And certainly as therapists, so many of us are striving to become neuro-affirming at this point. So why are these harmful? They're harmful because pressure to comply leads to masking and camouflaging. And this has been and is being supported by research. So here's a quote from a research article, which I share in the references. If students do not feel safe to be themselves, then they may hide their difficulties in a bid to be accepted and respected, which may increase anxiety. I would like to share a story with you. This is a story about a preschooler. I've changed the names and some circumstances. Gigi in circle time. Gigi was a student and she had sensory differences that included an intense responsiveness to visual and to auditory input. So she noticed everything. She had such an ability to notice everything in her world. As you can imagine, circle time was challenging to her. The teachers were very well-meaning and they could tell how very intelligent Gigi was, but they also noticed that she was quiet during circle. I mean, we understand more and more now, and she's likely quiet because she is using a lot of energy to be able to maintain herself in circle and manage all the movements of the other students, the sounds of the other students, the visuals in front of her. So one of the goals, though, was written because the teachers felt she wasn't participating enough. She wasn't getting enough out of circle time. So, one of the goals written for Gigi was that she would speak when asked a question in circle. The expectation really was a compliance expectation that when asked a question, she would answer. However, we also need to understand and respect Gigi's nervous system that that might not be the time or the place for her to be answering questions. So Gigi began, they started to pressure her. They'd ask her questions. They would make a point to ask Gigi questions. So Gigi began to become quite stressed out about not just circle time, but about school as well. And you may have heard of school refusal, and this is what started to happen with Gigi. So although we don't know exactly what Gigi's experience was, I suspect that it was just that this experience within circle was too much for her to handle. So when a student is like Gigi and we are writing compliance goals, we really need to step back and understand why that student is not able to comply to a question in the first place. In regard to this first type of IEP goal that does not help autistic students, let's make a conclusion here. And the conclusion can be that compliance leads to increased mental health difficulties such as anxiety and depression. And so we can rewrite compliance goals in a very different manner. We want to ask ourselves what supports can be used in place of compliance. Perhaps the student will, instead of them complying to a teacher's request or demand, the student will request clarification to start assigned work with the supports they need for understanding and regulation. Or another example, perhaps a student will use a break card, timer, or request clarification when given new instructions. We're going to step to the next type of IEP goal that does not support autistic students, and this is a social norm goal. The student will make eye contact when speaking. The student will take turns appropriately in conversations. The student will greet peers in the expected way, and the student will limit talk about special interests to 3 minutes. Why is this type of goal, a social norm IEP goal, harmful? This is because it encourages masking and ignores autistic communication style. Here's a quote from an article that I reference, and it says, "Autistic to autistic communication is often reported as easier and more satisfying than cross neurotype communication." And I want to share that the inverse is true as well. When autistics are pressured to adopt non-autistic social norms that are truly foreign to their processing of social information, then they find this difficult and uncomfortable, which detracts from enjoying positive mental health in school, which is crucial for learning. I'd like to share a story about social norm goals. This is actually a personal story. So it's told from my adult autistic experience. I was diagnosed autistic as an adult, and around the time of my diagnosis, I was playing on a couple of tennis teams. Tennis is a passion of mine, and I live in Southern California, so we have the privilege of being able to play tennis. I absolutely loved the members of the tennis team, that one in particular tennis team I was on at the time. I can also share that I truly could not stand the tennis get-togethers, shall we say. It was very awkward for me, and I realize now in retrospect it was because I was trying to act non-autistic. That is a stressor for me. For many years after my autism diagnosis, I worked with a neuro-affirming psychologist who truly encouraged me to embrace who I am as an autistic person, what my genuine traits are, and what my comfort levels are. This made a huge difference in my own personal experience on this tennis team. So instead of the stress of attending a party, and sometimes parties can last 1 to 2 hours, it would hang over me for days before the party, she suggested that I stop by for 10 minutes and say hello. And I knew I could do that. So I did that, and I tend to do that now. Not one member of my tennis team or any of my tennis friends, they were just happy to see me, and they even understood, which was really pretty magical. So we, likewise, with our autistic students in school, we want them to feel included and loved and welcomed and validated for who they are. We need our autistic students to understand their own autistic comfort when it comes to social interactions. So, in regard to the second type of IEP goal that does not help autistic students, social norm goals, let's make a conclusion. And the conclusion can be that forcing neurotypical social norms undermines confidence and authentic participation. We can rewrite social norm goals on IEPs instead. How about this one? Student will participate in greetings or discussions using preferred communications. So it may be speaking, or it may be AAC or gestures, etc. How about student will explore various ways of sharing interests with peers, knowing that peers may share differently. So accepting that we are all different. And in my clinic, I have a occupational therapy clinic for autistic children and teens in Thousand Oaks. And we talk all the time among parents and me and kids about how we're all different. And I intentionally will point out differences as more fascinations and celebrations of, wow, we're all so different, we're all so unique. A third way to rewrite a social norm goal could be to say student will describe how autistic and non-autistic people may follow different social norms. That's a beautiful thing when they can understand and describe how they work in a certain way, and maybe a friend who's non-autistic works in another way. A third type of IEP goal that does not help autistic students is ignoring sensory regulation needs. And let me share what I mean by this. Student will remain seated with hands still during lessons. Student will refrain from humming or making throat noises. Student will not smell classroom objects. So why is this type of IEP goal harmful? Well, suppressing sensory regulation leads to distress, distraction, and withdrawal. Here is a quote from a 2022 study. Autistic children described needing movement, fidgeting, or repetitive actions in order to maintain focus and regulation. I would like to share a story about this. Maya during writing time. So, Maya was a 7-year-old autistic child who had a 20-minute writing block first thing in the morning. Maya, she wanted to write. She wanted to do her quote unquote job at school, but her body needed to move first. So she'd stand, she'd pace a few steps, run around her desk, and then she'd return to work, maybe put a couple of words on the page. And the movement enabled her to settle enough. And I truly think that the movement, which is actually the case with many people, I think movement helps us to think and come up with ideas. Her IEP, however, and I wrote this down, had a goal that was, quote, Maya will remain seated during independent work for 20 minutes. Because of this goal, her teacher and her aides, in their best well-meaning intentions, they were frequently on her, reminding her to sit down and get her work done. She can move once she's done. But the more she stayed seated, the harder it was for her to focus. So her legs would like be jiggling and jittering, her shoulders moving around. And sometimes she just shut down completely, like almost like learned helplessness. Like, if you want me to sit, fine, I'll sit every now and then. And then there was no writing going on. And you could just see by her demeanor, it wasn't working. So over time, things did not improve. And she started to resist writing altogether. And she started saying things like, I hate writing. Writing is stupid. One time when I walked into the classroom, I actually saw the paraprofessional hand her a writing journal, and she started to cry. She just started to cry. So things were not only not working, things were becoming much worse because of this goal that was ignoring her sensory regulation need to move. So that team, IEP team, did end up rewriting the goal, and that we actually switched it around completely. I'll read it because I have it written down here. Maya will participate in writing activities with movement regulation strategies encouraged and used as needed, including pacing, standing, and alternatively jumping from one foot to the other as Maya was thinking. So everything shifted. Maya was able to move for a few minutes, and she had so many ideas. It enabled her to get the writing done. So I wanted to share that story, that when we don't ignore, but rather we notice and embrace what a student needs to be regulated from a sensory perspective, what they need, then we can really shift things and support the student and enable participation and learning. In regard to the third type of IEP goal that does not help autistic students, ignoring sensory regulation needs, let's make a conclusion about this. So, denying sensory needs prevents an autistic student from achieving emotional regulation, and it negatively impacts their ability to learn. So, we can rewrite these goals instead. Student will use movement strategies, standing desk, pacing, stretching, etc., to support engagement. Student will use stimming, movement, and other varied sensory strategies, fidgeting, humming, smelling safe items, vocalizing, etc., as part of a regulation plan. The fourth and final IEP goal that does not help autistic students is tolerance goals. The student will tolerate noisy cafeteria without leaving. The student will tolerate group work without covering ears. Why is this harmful? Because forcing endurance of overwhelming environments leads to trauma and avoidance. If we're being continually forced to try to engage in a setting and circumstances that are painful or just uncomfortable, we will not thrive, but the opposite will happen instead. Someone once put it so well: lying on a bed of nails does not get easier over time. I want to share a quote from a recent and relevant research article. Classrooms inherently challenge one's ability to process sensory information and focus attention on educationally relevant information. I will share another story about this IEP goal. Liam was a 6-year-old autistic student who loved sharing fun science facts that he got from YouTube, and he was really into a few different YouTube channels. But lunchtime was particularly difficult for him. The cafeteria, as most cafeterias are, was very busy, full of chatter, lots of noises, and Liam sometimes needed to eat just slowly. That's how he ate. He ate slowly, which also meant he was in the cafeteria for a long time if he was going to eat his full meal. His IEP included the goal that Liam will tolerate eating in the cafeteria with peers for the entire lunch period without leaving the table. So Liam tried genuinely, but he felt tense. You could see it, and he felt anxious. Sometimes he stopped eating altogether. He would say he was done because he needed something different. So over time, Liam just began saying things like, I'm not hungry, or he'd try to skip lunch, or he'd nibble a few bites. But the anxiety was not even enabling him to eat as he had been originally, even. He came back to class hungry, which turns at times into hangry or irritable. And this made learning not happen in the afternoons. And we all knew this. Everyone on the IEP team knew that it had to do with having these difficulties at lunch. So this type of goal needs to be rewritten. Liam will participate in lunchtime using supports such as choosing a quieter spot within the cafeteria, if that's even possible, taking breaks throughout lunch, or finishing his food in an alternate location, which is really one of the probably best accommodations we could make. This could shift everything for Liam, and he might then be able to eat full meals at lunch again and feel good and be able to learn in the afternoon. So, for the final type of IEP goal that does not help autistic students, tolerance goals, we can agree on a conclusion. And that could be that different sensory processing often leads to overwhelm in busy classroom environments and inability to focus on academic tasks and learning. We can rewrite this instead. Student will use headphones, quiet spaces, or communication strategies such as asking for a break to remain engaged in academics in school. Another example could be that the student will develop self-understanding of one's own sensory processing comfort and discomfort in order to identify dysregulating classroom or school input. We have come to the end of the presentation for the Insight to Autism in Schools Mindful Mondays. Please follow me on YouTube. Please reach out to me with any questions by email at kidsmasterskills@gmail.com. I also mentioned my Insight to Autism 2 courses that are available. There is the course for OT professionals, which gives you 8 AOTA contact hours. And there's also the course that I'm developing now for parents, teachers, and professionals. The OT course is already available. The parent, teacher, professional, other professionals course will be available October 15th. Also, see my website because I do have discounts available in the next week. This is because I only just launched the Insight to Autism for School-Based OT. So I'm starting at lower prices, and I do want to make this affordable. That's part of what is very meaningful to me, that this can get out into the world so that the actual people who I want to reach will be reached. If you would like, I would love to have you follow me on Instagram and follow me on Facebook. And you can always reach out to me, kidsmasterskills@gmail.com, by email. And I will say goodbye for now. And hopefully I will see you next week. Thank you.